Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Shift Mirror. Today, I'm going to quickly run through the course to give you an idea of what to expect inside. So, what you must understand about the Shift Mirror is we can recognize a story when we see it when it's about somebody else. But when it comes to our own story, often we're a little bit confused. And so, from that perspective, I created the shift mirror. So, what usually happens in any story that you read or see, the main character has set out for a goal. He or she wants to achieve something. Then the process of the movie starts. But there is no story without conflict. There are what I defined as 11 different emotional phases that somebody goes through to go from the first point of the story, the beginning phase, to the end of the story. And so I want to start with the student journey. This one will guide you through the entire course. So let's take a look at it. In chapter one, I introduce the shift mirror. And in chapter two, we explore voices from the mirror. So this is basically a link to my podcast. In the next chapter, this one is really interesting, and I just want to explain it real quickly because you need to know a few things about how your life is structured in order for you to go through a shift. And there's just a few main themes to look at. So, for example, the 9 domains of life, such as work, money, home and belonging, love and friendship, body and health, play and chaos, belief or your belief systems, your passion and your dreams, and the past. And so these are basically these are like doors to your life. And whenever you start collecting or writing notes about your life, these are the main doors you're going to go through in order to start writing or to start collecting. And an interesting thing to notice is that within these different areas of life, you also carry roles. And these roles are also divided into two different aspects. So on one side, you have the roles that you claim for yourself, and then there's also the roles that other people cast on you. So this is basically like an angle from which to start collecting or writing notes. There is also different types of sources, which means like how are you going to collect information about yourself, about your life, about your story. You can do it through written notes, through emails you've sent, even conversations with AI, a podcast, a poem, speech, or even a voice note. And of course, then there is in the press. This doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be in a newspaper like the picture, but what it means is that I've divided the way to collect information about yourself into two different categories. Either you write something about yourself, or you collect something about yourself, or it's somebody else who said something about you. And these two categories are very important later in the course. The ones that are your own voice are much more important because it's your perspective ultimately that counts more. Then in chapter four, we actually start gathering all your material. So anything that you've written in the past is called gathering. But you can also write new notes. And in the end of this chapter, I also explain to you how to save these in your students folder. And afterwards, the idea is to collect all of these different notes into one PDF or Word file. And then consequently, it will be uploaded to Google Notebook. Which brings us to the chapter about Google Notebook. So basically, Google Notebook is what I call the mirror. It's basically an AI system that collects different documents and can find patterns throughout the documents. When you set up your space in Google Notebook, there are three different kinds of prompts. The first one basically takes a picture of your life and analyzes where you are. The second prompt helps you go from one chapter of a life to your next chapter. And the third prompt is basically to come and check in again to see if you've made any progress. So it's really, the course is really taking you by the hand from, one side of the bridge to the other side of the bridge. This is what your mirror should look like. You put your text bundle in there, you have your anatomy of a shift blueprint. Here you have your custom prompt. And then the last step to take is the prompts. So here you have three different prompts. We will choose the first one. So you open it up, copy everything, paste it in here, tack. And then I'm going to let Google Notebook start analyzing my life and which chapter I am in. So this is really cool. So this is what the results are going to look like inside your notebook once you've ran it. So every time there's going to be a stamp. And the stamp, it gives you some information about the run that you're doing or the round that you're doing. Talks about the voices that are covered, which domains of life you're active, such as work, money, home and belonging, love and friendship, which role you assigned yourself that you play in these areas of life, and which roles other people assign to you. So every time it also asks me, like, before we go further, do you have any new material since your last reflection? If not, say so, and we will only work with what is already here. So this is really cool because you have three different prompts, and every time that you put in a new prompt, you should basically have collected more information about yourself. And if you haven't, basically the notebook is going to tell you, hey, you haven't done it yet. So, or do you want to go forward or no? Because if you do go forward and you have no new information, you will not get a better result. You will just stagnate. So, what does it show you? It shows you your core identity, it shows you your evolution arc, it shows you the gravity point deepener. This is a whole mouthful, but basically, whenever something really big happens in your life, your whole story tends to gravitate around that thing that has happened. For example, recently my grandfather has passed, and now I also feel that within my story, a lot of things are turning around this gravitational point, and my story is really bending around it. It's not like I have. It's weird to say, but I don't really have a choice. Like, this is something that happened to me, and now I have to navigate around this big life moment that I experienced. In the anatomy of a shift here, the number 3, basically it will give you a reflection on every single phase that you have talked about. Whether you name it or not, it will recognize the patterns and it will tell you which phases you've completed or how far you are in each phase. This one is interesting. If you've gone through multiple circles in your life, so the 11 emotional phases, if you've already completed them a few times, it will tell you recurring themes between each time you circle around, each time you complete a full story. The next one is really interesting. These are your relational patterns. So basically, this rule maps out how you relate to others, to your community, and to yourself. And it talks about the cost of being seen. So basically, this means that when you start thinking about your story and you then want to communicate it with other people, you can do that one on one, but you can also communicate your story in a more public setting, like maybe you're doing a speech or something. And a lot of people maybe have stage fright, and then under that category, the cost of being seen means that you put yourself out there with a certain amount of vulnerability, and that sometimes can feel very confrontational for some people. So this one is really interesting. I'm just going to read it. The inner signal deepener. We will trace your inner signals, which are the bodily sensations, tensions, dread, and sudden lightness or quiet pull that spoke to you before your mind could explain what was happening. We will look at your track record when you listed to these physical warnings and when you overrode them, letting the evidence speak for itself. Then there's the fear and the costume deepener. Basically, it will name your fears and it will tell you if you are trying to avoid them or if you're confronting them. It keeps record of courage, which is also super interesting. Basically, this shows if there was a fear in your life, if you've already crossed it before. The next one is what should be remembered. This is your anchor box. It holds the essential truths, unresolved questions, and transition moments that you cannot afford to forget as the noise of daily life returns. And then the next chapter, what should never be faked. It also gives you reflection inputs with keywords, visual motives, story categories, and long term memory. It preserves some lines, some quotes that really mean something within the context of your story. And finally, the last things that the mirror shows you is a reflection brief and a translation. So basically, we walk the findings of this reflection into the actual rooms of your life. We will draw your roles from 3 distinct sources, your own words, your declared input, and the about me voices. And finally, in the last word, we get a working title, so it kind of describes who you are. The practice is basically talking about your discipline, and then the material of the future self. So sometimes when you have written material about who you want to become, you are already thinking about your future self, and the notebook will talk about it as well. So there we go. You now have an idea of what Shift Mirror can do for you. I just want to add one more thing because we haven't taken a look at it yet. But you have the studio right here. So what you can do, for example, and this is super cool, is based on the information that you've just produced with the notebook, you can create an audio overview. You can create a slide deck. You can even create a really beautiful cinematic video overview. So basically, here you get like a little movie about your life, like a little documentary. You can even add custom information. For example, if you want to talk about your fears, like have it analyze your fears and then create a story around that. So really, here your imagination is the limit. So there you have it. Now let's just navigate back to the course. And so, for example, I used myself as a sort of like a litmus test, or as I prefer to call it, a patient zero. So I can go to that chapter here. Basically, my life has not been easy, far from it. And one thing that I felt like I was missing is this kind of, I wouldn't call it certainty, but I was kind of like, if you dropped someone in the woods without a compass, then it would be really hard for them to get out of it, and everything looks the same, trees, plants, more plants. Uh, and it's sometimes overwhelming in that situation. If you can visualize it, it's quite overwhelming to stand there and not know where to go. And what I wanted for my own life was this compass, this thing that helped me navigate myself outside of the forest. But so, what you need to know, as me being the patient zero, is that I was searching for structure in my life and I wanted clarity. And the way that I found clarity was through doing my podcast and talking to a lot of entrepreneurs who have also had to find their own compass, to go and find themselves outside of the forest. So I decided to make my own podcast in which I explain my own story. And I really try to give you guys an honest view of what my life has been like and where it's going. And so initially, I developed the shift mirror for me. But now that I see that it works and I see that it's working on other people, that's kind of like, that's the reason why I made the shift mirror. Like, I want to share my knowledge. And I don't know if you guys been following the Firestarters for a bit, but my logo is a circle, white circle with a bunch of color. And so the full circle moment is actually now. Is now I get to share my knowledge with you. I always say, knowledge is circular. And that's kind of how it is in life, right? You are young, older people teach you stuff. Then you grow up, you learn your own ways, you adapt, and then you make your own conclusions, and then you teach the younger generation. So that's the whole thing about teaching, and it's I'm really passionate about it because for some reason this is a calling. So I hope I can take you with all this enthusiasm through the course. And maybe you're in the darkness phase, and if that is the case, then, and you're doing your shift mirror, and the things that come back at you, that the things that get reflected back at you are very hard or very confronting, please take a break, and take a moment and stop with the course and just, have a conversation with someone or go for a walk or cook or do a sport activity and let it settle, because the truth sometimes is very confronting. So I also ask you to do this framework, to do this course with a certain amount of courage and honesty towards yourself, and allowing for the good things to be reflected and the bad things. And the course may be borderline something close to therapy, but I'm not allowed to claim it because I'm not a therapist and I haven't done the right education for it. You're ultimately the boss of your own life. You're in the driver's seat, you decide, and I reflect. So, this is a little disclaimer that I'm putting in here. And I hope you'll understand that I cannot be held responsible for your life, but I am here to take you by the hand and to guide you through this dark phase and to show you that what lies on the other side. You know, they say the light at the end of the tunnel. Well, for me, the light at the end of the tunnel is knowing what phase could happen next. So the course is especially interesting for people who are in a dark phase and more informational for people who have already crossed the dark phase and gone into the more lighter chapters of their life. In really short, that is what the shift mirror does. So if you have any more questions, feel free to send me an email and I will always respond as quickly as possible. So thank you and hope to see you soon in the shift mirror.